The smallest wolf in the kingdom should never have been standing on the edge of that cliff. The narrow shelf of stone clung to the mountainside like a forgotten breath, buried beneath fresh snow and wrapped in drifting mist. Far below, jagged rocks waited in silence, their sharp edges hidden beneath white clouds that swallowed everything they touched. Even the wind seemed afraid to cross that lonely place. The tiny white wolf stood there alone. Its legs trembled beneath its thin body as loose pebbles rolled over the edge one after another, disappearing into the endless valley below. It was far too young to understand death, yet every frightened glance in its pale blue eyes seemed to sense that one more step would end everything. Then the mountain gave way. The stone beneath its paws cracked with a sound like breaking ice. The little wolf slipped forward. Somewhere behind the fog, enormous wolves roared. Royal hunters shouted warnings that vanished into the wind. Boots pounded against frozen ground. But before anyone else could reach the cliff, a young woman ran. She did not stop to think. She did not ask who the tiny wolf belonged to. She never looked at the impossible distance between herself and the falling pup. She simply leaped. Her fingers caught soft white fur only a heartbeat before the little wolf disappeared into empty air. For one brief moment, she had saved its life. Then the ground vanished beneath her own feet. Snow exploded around her as her body slid across loose stone. Her boots found nothing but crumbling rock. One hand held the frightened wolf tightly against her chest. The other clawed desperately at the frozen earth. A single root stopped her fall. It bent. It groaned. The valley opened beneath her like the mouth of the world itself. Every wolf fell silent. Even the mountain seemed to stop breathing. No one understood why a complete stranger had risked her own life for the kingdom's smallest and weakest wolf. No one understood why that frightened little creature buried its face against her heart instead of struggling to escape. And no one had ever seen the Alpha King wear fear upon his face. Until the moment he realized he might lose them both. That single heartbeat awakened something older than kingdoms. Older than crowns. Older than the oldest story ever whispered beneath the moon. It awakened a forgotten promise between wolves and humankind. Long before the mountains remembered her name, Elara belonged to no one. She lived at the edge of Briar Hollow, the smallest village in the Ashen Crown kingdom, where crooked cottages leaned against one another as though sharing secrets whenever winter winds swept through the valley. Smoke curled gently from stone chimneys every morning, carrying the comforting smell of fresh bread and burning pine across narrow streets lined with worn wooden fences. The villagers knew Elara well enough to greet her with polite smiles. But they never truly welcomed her. Some believed she carried strange fortune. Others believed she carried none at all. She had arrived as a small child wrapped inside an old grey blanket after a travelling merchant discovered her asleep beneath the branches of an ancient oak tree. No one knew where she had come from. No one ever came looking for her. The village healer, an elderly widow named Mara, had taken her in without asking questions. "You don't need a family to deserve kindness," Mara often said whenever curious children asked why the quiet girl lived with her. Those words became the foundation of Elara's life. Years passed. The little orphan grew into a young woman whose kindness seemed almost impossible in a world that rewarded strength more than compassion. While others hurried past injured birds, she stopped. When abandoned fox kits cried beneath fallen logs, she stayed until they were warm enough to move again. If a horse refused food, Elara noticed before its owner did. If a wounded rabbit hid beneath tangled roots, somehow she always found it. She never expected thanks. Helping simply felt as natural as breathing. Many evenings she returned home long after sunset with muddy boots, scratched hands, and another story she never bothered telling. Mara would only smile. "You found another patient." Elara laughed softly while placing a sleepy hedgehog beside the warm fireplace. "It found me." Life remained simple, peaceful, almost forgotten, until the storm came. It began shortly before dusk. Dark clouds gathered above the Frostfang Mountains, swallowing the last pieces of blue sky until daylight disappeared hours before sunset. Thunder rolled through distant valleys like giant footsteps, while cold rain turned quickly into heavy snow as icy winds swept down from the northern peaks. By midnight, the entire kingdom had disappeared beneath white silence. Tree branches bent beneath frozen weight. Rivers slowed beneath thin sheets of ice. Even wolves remained hidden inside their dens. The storm raged until morning. When the first pale sunlight finally reached Briar Hollow, the village looked as though winter itself had buried it overnight. Doors struggled to open against deep snow. Children laughed while climbing icy hills. Men gathered fallen branches broken by the wind. Elara stood outside Mara's cottage, wrapping a thick wool cloak around herself while examining the mountains in the distance. Something felt wrong. She couldn't explain it. The forest sounded empty. Usually mornings after snowstorms were alive with birds celebrating clear skies. Today, nothing. No cheerful songs. No fluttering wings. Only silence. She frowned. You hear it too. Mara stepped onto the porch carrying a basket filled with dried herbs. The silence. The old woman nodded slowly. I've lived here nearly 60 years. Her tired eyes remained fixed upon the distant mountains. The forest speaks. Elara looked toward the frozen trees. And today? It refuses. Those words settled heavily between them. Neither woman spoke again for several moments. Then Mara gently handed over another empty basket. We're nearly out of frost leaf. Elara accepted it with a smile. I won't be long. You said that yesterday. I came back. Barely before midnight. Elara laughed. I'll return before dark. Mara reached forward and brushed a loose strand of brown hair away from the young woman's face. Kindness has a habit of delaying you. It usually needs me. It usually does. The old stay away from the high mountain paths. I will. It wasn't entirely true. Frostleaf grew best near the cliffs where icy streams fed hidden patches of rich soil beneath ancient pine trees. Elara had visited those places many times. She knew every narrow trail, every fallen log, every hidden spring. Or at least, she believed she did. The deeper she walked into the forest, the stranger everything became. Fresh snow muffled every footstep beneath her boots. Tall evergreens stood perfectly still beneath heavy white blankets. Cold air carried the clean scent of pine resin mixed with damp earth left behind by melting ice. Yet something refused to settle inside the woods. Birds burst from the branches overhead. Not one or two. Hundreds. Dark feathers filled the sky like drifting smoke. They weren't searching for food. They were fleeing. Elara stopped walking. Her heartbeat slowed. Birds never abandoned the mountain together. Especially after storms. A family of deer suddenly appeared between distant trees. Instead of watching her cautiously as wild animals usually did, they raced past without hesitation, their breath steaming into the freezing air. The smallest fawn stumbled. Its mother barely paused before urging it onward. Even the squirrels disappeared. Every creature moved in the same direction. Away from the mountains. Away from something unseen. Elara knelt beside fresh tracks pressed deeply into untouched snow. Not deer. Not fox. Wolf. Several wolves. Large ones. She studied them carefully. The prints were enormous. Larger than any wolves she had seen before. Their paws spread nearly as wide as both her hands placed together. Royal wolves. Her breathing caught. Stories about the Alpha King's wolves filled every village in Ashen Crown. Some claimed they were blessed by the moon itself. Others whispered they were monsters capable of tearing armored soldiers apart without slowing their stride. Very few people had ever seen them. Fewer still had survived meeting them. Yet something else caught her attention. Smaller tracks. Tiny ones. Uneven. They wandered between the larger paw prints before suddenly disappearing beneath scattered stones. A young wolf. Very young. Its steps looked uncertain. Separated. Lost. She reached down, gently touching one small print with her fingertips. Fresh. Only an hour old. A cold wind swept across the mountain trail. Then came another sound. Not thunder. Not birds. Not wolves. A cry. Tiny. Weak. Almost carried away by the wind before reaching her ears. Elara slowly raised her head. Again. A frightened little whimper echoed somewhere high above the cliffs. She stood without another thought. The basket of herbs remained forgotten beside the trail. The cry came once more, barely louder than the wind itself. But to Elara, it sounded like someone asking for help. She began climbing toward the mountains, unaware that hidden among the rocky ledges above, royal hunters had already spotted her. And far beyond the rising mist, the Alpha King searched desperately for the smallest member of his pack, unaware that fate had already chosen the one person who would change all of their lives forever. The climb grew steeper with every step. The narrow trail twisted through towering cliffs where snow clung to the rocks in thick white sheets. Frost-covered pines leaned over the path, their heavy branches creaking whenever the wind pushed through them. Every few moments, loose snow drifted from above, falling in soft curtains that erased Elara's footprints almost as quickly as she made them. The tiny cry came again. This time it was closer. It was weak now, exhausted, as though the little creature had spent every bit of strength it possessed calling into the endless silence. Elara pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders and continued climbing. The air grew thinner. Each breath burned inside her lungs. Sharp mountain winds tugged at her hair, carrying with them an unfamiliar scent. Wolf. Not the wild wolves that occasionally wandered near Briar Hollow. This scent was different. Older. Stronger. It carried the cold strength of ancient forests and moonlit nights. She slowed her pace. Fresh paw prints crossed the snowy ground ahead. There were many now. Some were enormous, pressed deep into the frozen earth by tremendous weight. Others belonged to younger wolves, smaller but equally powerful. Every trail circled toward the same place. Toward the cliffs. Something had happened here. She rounded a bend where the mountain narrowed into a long ridge barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. The wind rushed freely across the exposed stone, howling through cracks in the cliffs until it sounded almost like distant voices. Mist drifted between the rocks. Beyond it. Movement. Elara lowered herself behind a large boulder and carefully looked ahead. Nearly a dozen wolves stood scattered across the ridge. She had never imagined creatures so magnificent. Their thick white coats shimmered beneath the pale winter light, every strand touched with silver where frost had settled. Massive shoulders rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths. Their golden eyes searched every corner of the mountain with fierce determination. No ordinary wolves. Royal wolves. Guardians of the Alpha King. Their muscles remained tense, yet none of them moved forward. Instead, they watched. Waiting. Fear rested even in those powerful eyes. Elara followed their gaze. At first she saw nothing except drifting fog. Then the mist shifted. A narrow shelf of rock stretched from the cliff face several yards away. Half of it had already collapsed. Only one small section remained. Standing upon it was a tiny white wolf pup. Its fur looked brighter than the snow surrounding it. Far too small. Far too young. One front paw trembled uncontrollably. Its ears were pressed tightly against its head. The frightened little creature stared toward the larger wolves, trying desperately to reach them. His coat gleamed like moonlight against fresh snow. His body dwarfed every other wolf present. Even standing still, he carried the quiet authority of a king. His amber eyes never left the tiny wolf. The Alpha King. Elara knew it before anyone spoke his name. The stories had never described his true presence. Power surrounded him without effort. Yet beneath that strength, she saw something unexpected. Fear. Not fear for himself. Fear for the tiny life trapped beyond his reach. The Alpha King lowered himself slowly toward the edge. The little pup tried to answer. It lifted one trembling paw. A small stone shifted beneath it. Crack. The sound echoed across the cliff. Everyone froze. Another crack. The shelf lurched. Snow slid away. The little wolf lost its balance. Its frightened blue eyes widened. For one endless heartbeat. Time stopped. Then the mountain broke. The ledge shattered beneath the pup's feet. Stone exploded outward. The tiny wolf slipped into empty space. A cry burst from every wolf at once. The Alpha King lunged forward with impossible speed. Too far. Too late. Before anyone could even breathe. Another figure moved. Elara. She threw herself across the narrowing gap without thinking. Cold air slammed against her face. The valley opened beneath her. For one terrifying instant, there was nothing beneath her except empty sky. Her fingers stretched toward the falling pup. Almost. Almost. Soft white fur brushed against her fingertips. She reached farther. Pain shot through her shoulder. Then, she caught it. The tiny wolf crashed against her chest. Its frightened heartbeat pounded wildly beneath its soft fur. "I've got you," she whispered, though she scarcely heard her own voice above the roaring wind. But saving the pup had stolen her balance. Her boots struck loose stone instead of solid ground. Everything beneath her shifted. She hit the ridge hard. Snow burst upward. Momentum carried her forward. She slid. Faster. Faster. Sharp rocks tore through her gloves as she clawed desperately for anything that would stop her. The pup remained locked safely against her chest. She refused to let go. Not now. Not ever. The cliff edge rushed toward her. A single twisted root protruded from frozen earth. Elara caught it with one hand. Her body swung violently over the endless drop. Loose stones rained into the valley below. Silence followed. The root groaned beneath her weight. Far beneath her feet, clouds drifted lazily through the canyon. She could not even see the bottom. The tiny wolf buried its face beneath her chin, trembling so hard she could feel every shiver. "It's all right," she whispered through shaking breaths. It's all right." She wasn't sure whether she was comforting the pup or herself. Behind her, the entire wolf pack stood frozen. None of them growled. None bared their teeth. Their fierce golden eyes stared at the young woman hanging over death itself. The Alpha King took one careful step forward. Then another. Every movement was measured. One mistake could loosen the earth even more. His ears flattened. His powerful chest rose and fell rapidly. For the first time in countless years, the ruler of the royal wolves looked completely helpless. High above the ridge, hidden among broken stone, several royal hunters watched in stunned silence. Captain Rowan lowered his bow. "My king." No answer came. The Alpha King's attention never left Elara. Another sharp crack echoed beneath her hand. The old root split slightly. Tiny pieces of bark drifted into the abyss. Elara closed her eyes for only a second. Not because she accepted death, but because she feared dropping the little wolf more than falling herself. "If only one of us survives." Her grip tightened protectively around the pup. "Let it be you." The Alpha King's ears twitched. Though she had spoken barely above a whisper, he had heard every word. Something changed in his eyes. Not suspicion. Not caution. Respect. Deep. Immediate. Ancient. The root snapped again. Half of it tore free from the frozen cliff. Her body dropped several inches. The little wolf cried out. Above them, several wolves surged forward instinctively. The Alpha King stopped them with a single sharp growl. Too many paws would collapse the ridge. Only one chance remained. The great wolf lowered his massive body until his claws dug deep into the frozen earth. Muscles rippled beneath his snow-white coat. His amber eyes locked onto Elara's. She understood. Without words. Without fear. He was going to jump. And if he failed, the mountain would claim all three of them. The wind howled louder than ever as he gathered his strength. Then, with the force of an avalanche unleashed, the Alpha King hurled himself toward the crumbling edge. The Alpha King flew across the broken ground with the force of a winter storm. Snow exploded beneath his paws as his massive body crossed the final stretch of solid rock. His claws scraped against the frozen earth, searching for grip before he lunged the last few feet toward the cliff. Elara looked up just as the ancient root groaned once more. A loud crack echoed through the canyon. The root tore away. For one terrible heartbeat, she and the tiny wolf dropped into empty air. The wind roared around them. The world spun into a blur of white cliffs and dark stone. Then something struck her wrist. Not rock. Not wood. A powerful jaw. The Alpha King's teeth closed carefully around the thick leather bracer protecting her forearm. He held her with astonishing control, applying just enough pressure to stop her fall without breaking the bones beneath. The sudden force sent pain racing through Elara's shoulder. She cried out, but she never loosened her hold on the little wolf pressed safely against her chest. The Alpha King's paws slid across the icy ground. Fresh cracks spread beneath him. He was strong, but even he could not fight gravity alone. Behind him, another great wolf rushed forward. Then another. Without hesitation they locked their bodies together, shoulder against shoulder, digging powerful claws into the frozen mountain. The first wolf gripped the Alpha King's tail. The second braced against the first. A third anchored himself behind them. Soon an entire living chain stretched across the ridge. Snow flew into the air as every wolf strained with all its strength. Captain Rowan and the royal hunters finally reached the edge. Pull! The hunters drove long iron spears deep into the frozen earth before wrapping thick climbing ropes around them. Together, wolves and humans became one anchor. Slowly, painfully, the Alpha King stepped backward. Each movement gained only inches. Elara dangled helplessly above the endless valley, her boots brushing empty air. She refused to look down. Instead, she whispered softly to the frightened pup. "It's all right." Its tiny ears twitched. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." The little wolf slowly lifted its head. Its pale blue eyes met hers. Something changed. The frantic trembling stopped. Its breathing steadied. Then, to everyone's amazement, the tiny creature gently pressed its nose against her cheek. Not out of fear. Out of trust. The Alpha King saw it. So did every wolf on the mountain. No one spoke. No one moved except to continue pulling. After what felt like an eternity, Elara's fingers finally brushed solid ground. Captain Rowan reached down immediately. "Take my hand." She shifted the pup carefully into one arm before grasping his wrist. Several hunters pulled together. Moments later she collapsed onto the snowy ridge, breathing so hard that each breath burned her lungs. The little wolf remained tucked safely against her chest. She buried her face in its soft white fur, closing her eyes as relief swept through her trembling body. For a long while, no one spoke. Only the mountain wind filled the silence. The wolves slowly gathered around her. One after another. Massive creatures capable of bringing down armored warriors. Each stopped a respectful distance away. None growled. None showed their teeth. Instead, every head lowered. Captain Rowan blinked in disbelief. "I've never seen this." Another hunter whispered almost fearfully. "They're bowing." Even Elara failed to understand what she was seeing. The Alpha King approached alone. His enormous paws left deep prints in the fresh snow. When he stood before her, he seemed even larger than before. Scars crossed his broad shoulders, each one telling stories of battles survived. His amber eyes held neither anger nor suspicion. Only quiet curiosity. Elara remained kneeling. Very slowly, she extended one hand. Not to command. Not to tame. Simply to thank him. The Alpha King studied her trembling fingers. The cold mountain wind stirred his thick white fur. Seconds passed. Then, with remarkable gentleness, the great wolf lowered his head. His nose touched her open palm. Warm breath drifted across her frozen skin. Every hunter froze. Captain Rowan forgot to breathe. Among the wolves, several released low sounds that almost resembled sighs. The oldest member of the Royal Guard stepped forward. His muzzle had turned silver with age, and one cloudy eye spoke of countless winters survived. He stared silently at Elara before murmuring, "The old stories." Rowan looked toward him. "What stories?" The elder wolf-keeper slowly removed the hood covering his grey hair. His weathered face had grown pale. There was once a promise. No one interrupted him. His voice barely rose above the whispering wind. Long before the Ashen Crown kingdom existed, wolves and humans lived as guardians of one another. His tired eyes remained fixed on Elara. They said the bond could never be forced. He swallowed slowly. It would awaken only when a human chose a wolf's life above their own. Captain Rowan frowned. "Those are children's tales." "So I believed." The old man watched as the tiny wolf curled comfortably against Elara. "But I've served 3 Alpha Kings." His voice trembled. "I have never seen the heir allow anyone to touch him." Rowan looked toward the little wolf. The elder continued. He refused every nurse. Every guardian. Even. His eyes shifted respectfully toward the Alpha King. His own father. Elara blinked. Father, she looked down at the tiny wolf sleeping peacefully in her arms. This frightened little creature was the Alpha King's son. The future heir. Her heart nearly stopped. I'm sorry. She carefully tried to stand. I didn't know. The Alpha King stepped closer. For one brief moment she feared he wished to reclaim the pup. Instead, he simply waited. The little wolf slowly opened sleepy blue eyes. The Alpha King lowered his great head. Any other pup would have eagerly climbed into its father's embrace. This one looked at him, then looked back at Elara. With a tiny whine, it buried itself deeper against her cloak. Captain Rowan laughed softly in disbelief. I don't think His Highness wishes to leave. Even the hunters exchanged uncertain smiles. The Alpha King remained perfectly still. Though impossible to mistake, sadness flickered briefly across his face before disappearing beneath calm dignity. He made no attempt to force the pup away. Perhaps he understood. Elara looked between them. Her voice became almost apologetic. He can stay with me. She gently stroked the pup's tiny ears. Until he feels safe enough. The Alpha King closed his eyes briefly. When they opened again, he gave the smallest nod. An entire kingdom's ruler. Trusting a stranger. The moment settled over the mountain like fresh snowfall. Then, a sharp hiss sliced through the silence. Captain Rowan's eyes widened. Down! An arrow struck the snow exactly where Elara had been standing a heartbeat earlier. It buried itself deep into the frozen ground. The black metal tip glistened. Not with ice. With poison. Another arrow screamed through the air. One of the younger wolves cried out as it struck his shoulder. Chaos erupted. Shields. Hunters. Protect the air. The peaceful mountain exploded into motion. Royal hunters raised heavy shields while wolves surged toward the cliffs above. Dark figures moved between distant rocks before disappearing into thick fog. There on the eastern ridge. After them. More arrows rained from the mist. One struck a pine tree. Another shattered against stone. A third narrowly missed Captain Rowan. The Alpha King stepped directly in front of Elara and the tiny heir. His enormous body became a living wall between them and the deadly attack. His deep growl rolled across the mountains with enough force to shake snow from the surrounding cliffs. Every wolf answered. The sound echoed from peak to peak until it seemed the mountains themselves had awakened. The hidden assassins hesitated. For just a moment. It was enough. The wolves charged. White shadows disappeared into the swirling fog with terrifying speed. The clash of battle echoed somewhere beyond the cliffs. Steel rang against steel. Men shouted. Wolves roared. Snow continued falling gently, covering blood and broken arrows alike. Captain Rowan knelt beside the poisoned shaft still buried in the ground. His face hardened. This wasn't an accident. The old wolf keeper slowly picked up the arrow, studying its black feathers. His weathered hands trembled. I know this poison. He looked toward the Alpha King. They never came hunting wolves. Silence settled once again. Then the old man spoke the words that chilled every soul upon the mountain. They came for the little prince. And somewhere beyond the fog, hidden eyes watched the Alpha King's family retreat, already preparing the next move in a far darker plan. The mountain no longer belonged to silence. The clash of steel echoed through the narrow passes while frightened ravens burst into the grey sky in dark waves. Snow that had rested peacefully upon ancient pines only moments before now drifted down in scattered clouds, shaken loose by running wolves and scrambling men. Every heartbeat seemed to carry another warning, another unseen danger hiding behind the white curtain of mist. Captain Rowan crouched beside the poisoned arrow, turning it carefully between gloved fingers. Its shaft was carved from black ash wood. Its feathers belonged to a mountain hawk rarely found inside the kingdom. More troubling than either was the dark green stain coating the iron tip. He had seen that poison only once before. Years ago. on a battlefield where wounded soldiers had died without ever opening their eyes again. "This was made for killing quickly," Rowan said quietly. The Alpha King lowered his massive head, his amber eyes never leaving the surrounding cliffs. He understood. This had never been an attack of opportunity. Someone had known exactly where the young prince would be. Someone had guided killers into the sacred mountains. A low whistle echoed through the fog. 2 royal wolves returned first. Blood stained their white fur, but it was not their own. They circled the Alpha King before lowering their heads. The message was clear. The attackers had escaped. One hunter approached, breathing hard after climbing the icy slope. "We found 3 bodies." He swallowed. They carried no banners. No markings. The hunter shook his head. Their armor was plain. Their faces were covered. Captain Rowan's expression darkened. "Professionals." The Alpha King released a slow, heavy breath. He lifted his gaze toward the northern peaks. The journey had changed. Finding the lost prince had been the day's mission. Now survival came first. The old wolf keeper stepped forward, leaning heavily upon his carved staff. "We cannot return to the capital." Rowan looked at him. "The roads are watched. The palace may be watched as well." Several hunters exchanged uneasy glances. The old man continued. "If betrayal has entered the court, taking the prince home may lead him straight into another trap." For several moments no one spoke. Only the wind answered. Then the Alpha King turned away from the cliff. Without a sound, he began walking east, toward the oldest forests in the kingdom. The wolf keeper smiled sadly. "He has chosen Moon Hollow." The name drifted across the snow like a forgotten prayer. Even the hunters straightened at its mention. Elara had heard stories of Moon Hollow as a little girl. Children believed it was a place where moonlight never faded and wolves spoke to the stars. Adults dismissed those tales with quiet laughter. Yet none of them ever traveled there. Some places remained untouched because people feared what they did not understand. Captain Rowan approached Elara. "We'll be traveling through dangerous country." She looked down at the tiny prince sleeping peacefully inside her cloak. His small body rose and fell with calm breaths, completely unaware that death had nearly claimed him twice in a single day. "I'll come." Rowan hesitated. "You understand that whoever wants him dead may attack again?" Elara nodded. "I know. You owe us nothing." She looked toward the Alpha King. The great wolf had paused several steps away, waiting. Not commanding. Waiting. Her fingers gently stroked the little prince's snowy ears. "I couldn't walk away now." A faint smile touched Rowan's weathered face. "I hoped you'd say that." Their journey began before the snowstorm returned. The wolf pack moved with remarkable discipline. 2 wolves led the way, disappearing silently through the trees before reappearing minutes later to signal that the path remained clear. Others guarded both sides of the group, their sharp ears catching sounds no human could hear. The Alpha King never walked at the front. He remained close behind Elara. Close enough to protect her if danger appeared. Far enough that she never felt threatened. By sunset the mountains had changed. Towering cliffs gave way to endless forests where ancient cedars stretched toward the fading sky. Thick moss covered fallen logs, while frozen streams wound between towering roots that looked older than memory itself. The forest smelled different here. Fresh pine mixed with damp earth and wild herbs hidden beneath the snow. Somewhere nearby, an owl called into the evening. For the first time since reaching the mountains, life returned to the woods. As darkness settled, Rowan ordered a brief stop beside a sheltered clearing surrounded by enormous stone pillars. Small fires were impossible. Smoke would reveal their position. Instead the hunters unpacked dried meat, oat bread, and smoked fish from leather packs. Elara knelt beside a wounded wolf resting beneath a cedar tree. The poisoned arrow had missed his heart, but a deep cut across his shoulder continued to bleed. He watched her carefully as she opened her herb pouch. "It's going to sting." The wolf's ears twitched. She crushed frost leaf between smooth stones before mixing it with snow until it formed a thick green paste. Her hands remained steady. Gentle. She cleaned the wound carefully. The great wolf flinched once. Then he lay perfectly still. There. She wrapped clean linen around his shoulder. That should help. Instead of moving away, the wolf slowly lowered his massive head until it rested beside her knee. A deep rumble vibrated softly inside his chest. Not a warning. Gratitude. Nearby, several younger wolves watched quietly. One by one they moved closer. Not begging. Simply curious. Captain Rowan smiled while sharpening his sword. I've served these wolves for 25 years. He shook his head in quiet disbelief. They trust very few people. Elara looked around at the silent circle of white wolves. I'm not doing anything special. The old wolf keeper laughed softly. Exactly. She frowned. I don't understand. You never ask them to trust you. He watched as another wolf gently nudged Elara's shoulder with its nose. You simply give them reasons to. His words lingered in the cold night air. Before Elara could answer, the tiny prince stirred inside her cloak. Small blue eyes blinked sleepily. He stretched one tiny paw before climbing clumsily into her lap. The hunters chuckled. The little wolf looked around at the enormous pack surrounding him. Then, without hesitation, he curled into a small white ball against Elara's legs. Even the Alpha King watched silently from across the clearing. The distance between father and son seemed greater than the miles they had traveled. Not because of anger. Because of uncertainty. The little prince had feared everyone since birth. Every servant. Every healer. Every guardian. Even his own father. Yet beside Elara, he slept without trembling. Late that evening, after the moon rose above the towering trees, Elara walked toward a nearby stream to refill her waterskin. Moonlight shimmered across the thin layer of ice, turning the quiet water into silver glass. She knelt carefully. Something caught her eye. A faint glow. She looked down at the sleeping prince wrapped inside her cloak. The soft silver mark beneath his neck was shining. Very faintly. Like moonlight trapped beneath white fur. Her breath caught. She gently brushed the fur aside. The strange mark resembled a crescent moon surrounded by delicate lines that spread outward like the roots of an ancient tree. As her fingertips touched it, the glow brightened. Not enough to light the forest. Only enough to paint her hands with soft silver light. The tiny prince sighed peacefully. Then the light slowly faded again. Elara stared in silence. What are you? A voice answered behind her. The future. She turned quickly. The old wolf keeper stood among the trees, leaning upon his carved staff. His weathered eyes rested upon the fading mark. So, he whispered almost to himself. It truly lives. You know what this is. He nodded slowly. I feared I never would. What does it mean? Instead of answering immediately, he looked toward the distant Alpha King standing watch beneath the pines. The prince was never weak. His voice became heavy with old memories. He was born carrying something others have spent generations trying to find. Elara glanced down at the sleeping pup. This mark. The old man nodded. It has appeared only a handful of times in all our history. What does it do? I don't know. His answer surprised her. We only know what the oldest stories say. And they say. He looked toward the moon shining above the forest canopy. That when the silver mark awakens. He paused. The fate of wolves and humans changes forever. A cold breeze slipped through the trees. Somewhere far beyond the camp. A branch snapped. The Alpha King's ears rose instantly. Every wolf lifted its head. Someone was watching them again. The sharp crack of the branch vanished into the forest as quickly as it had come, leaving only the restless whisper of the wind weaving through the towering cedars. Every wolf was on its feet before the sound had fully faded. Their ears stood tall. Their noses lifted into the cold night air. The deep, steady rumble rising from their chests spread across the camp like distant thunder. Captain Rowan was already drawing his sword. The polished steel reflected the moonlight as he stepped between Elara and the darkness beyond the trees. The hunters formed a silent circle, bows raised toward the endless forest. No one spoke. No one needed to. Even the smallest mistake could reveal their position. The Alpha King slowly walked to the edge of the clearing. His powerful body became perfectly still. Only his nose moved as he searched the wind. A long moment passed. Then another. Finally, one of the scouts emerged from the darkness. The white wolf moved without making a sound, his fur dusted with fresh snow. He lowered his head before the Alpha King. No scent. No tracks. Whatever had been watching them was gone. Captain Rowan released a slow breath. They're becoming careful. The old wolf keeper nodded. They know the wolves can hear them now. The camp remained awake until dawn. No fires were lit. The hunters rested only one at a time while the wolves guarded the clearing without complaint. Elara barely slept. The tiny prince remained curled against her side, occasionally letting out soft sleepy whimpers that faded the moment her fingers brushed gently across his back. When the first rays of morning slipped through the forest, silver mist floated between the ancient trees, wrapping Moon Hollow in quiet mystery. The journey continued. As the sun climbed higher, the forest slowly changed around them. The towering cedars gave way to trees unlike any Elara had ever seen. Their trunks were wider than village cottages. Their bark shimmered with pale grey patterns that resembled flowing water. Long strands of emerald moss hung from enormous branches, gently swaying despite the still air. Even the birds sang differently here. Their songs echoed longer, as though the forest itself answered them. No hunter spoke above a whisper. Every step felt like entering a sacred place. Near midday, the trees suddenly opened. Elara stopped without realizing it. Moon Hollow stretched before her. It was more beautiful than any story had ever described. Ancient stone pillars rose from the earth in perfect circles, each carved with wolves, stars, moons, and towering trees whose roots reached deep beneath the mountains. Crystal-clear streams crossed soft green meadows untouched by winter, warmed by hidden springs beneath the ground. Wildflowers bloomed despite the season, their colors glowing beneath gentle sunlight. Dozens of white wolves moved peacefully among the stones. Some were old enough that their fur had turned silver. Others were playful pups chasing butterflies across the grass. None showed fear. None showed anger. It felt less like a sanctuary, and more like a forgotten piece of the world where peace had never been broken. The moment the Alpha King stepped into the valley, every wolf stopped. One after another, they bowed their heads. Not out of fear. Out of respect. The little prince climbed from Elara's arms. For the first time since she had found him, he stood confidently upon his own tiny paws. He looked around with wide blue eyes. Something inside him seemed to recognize this place. Without hesitation, he trotted toward the center of the valley. Elara instinctively followed. At the heart of Moon Hollow stood an enormous stone unlike any she had ever seen. It rose nearly twice the height of a man, its smooth surface covered with carvings so old that moss had grown inside every line. A great wolf sat beside it. His fur had become almost completely silver with age. Scars crossed his muzzle, yet his eyes remained bright and calm, carrying the quiet wisdom of countless winters. Every wolf lowered its head as he slowly stood. Even the Alpha King bowed before him. The Elder Guardian, keeper of Moon Hollow. He walked toward Elara with slow, careful steps. The tiny prince hurried ahead, reaching the old wolf first. Instead of greeting him with excitement, the little wolf simply sat quietly beside him. The elder smiled. "So." His voice was soft but clear. "The mountain has finally chosen." Elara blinked. "I don't understand." "You will." He looked toward the ancient stone. "For generations we have waited." His weathered hand brushed away moss from one of the carvings. Moonlight, wolves, humans, standing together. Not as masters. Not as servants. As equals. The first Alpha King did not rule alone, the elder began. He ruled beside a healer. Elara listened silently. She carried no sword. No crown. No title. Only compassion. He traced another carving. When fear divided wolves and humans, she crossed the distance between them. His eyes slowly lifted to meet Elara's. Not because she was fearless, but because someone needed her. A quiet breeze drifted through Moon Hollow. The little prince walked toward the ancient stone. As he did, the silver mark beneath his neck began to glow once again. Soft, gentle, like moonlight reflected upon still water. The carvings answered. One by one, faint silver lines awakened across the ancient monument. The entire valley fell silent. Even the birds stopped singing. Elara stared in disbelief. What is happening? The elder guardian whispered. The bond remembers. The light slowly spread across the carvings, revealing scenes hidden for centuries. Humans healing wounded wolves. Wolves guiding lost children through blizzards. Kings standing beside ordinary villagers. An age when neither feared the other. Tears filled the old guardian's eyes. I thought these stories would die with me. Captain Rowan stepped closer. So the legends were true. They were never legends. The elder's voice carried quiet certainty. They were memories. The Alpha King looked from the glowing stone to Elara. For the first time, the burden in his amber eyes softened. Not because danger had passed. Because hope had finally appeared. That evening, the valley celebrated quietly. No grand feast. No music. Only shared peace. Hunters repaired broken armor while children from the hidden sanctuary laughed as young wolves chased them through the meadow. Fresh bread baked inside stone ovens. The smell of roasted vegetables drifted through the cool evening air. For the first time in many years, the Alpha King watched his son playing. The tiny prince stumbled awkwardly through the grass, tumbling over his own oversized paws before running back toward Elara. She laughed as he clumsily climbed into her lap again. The sound seemed to surprise even herself. The Alpha King watched from a distance. The elder guardian quietly approached him. You blame yourself. The Alpha King lowered his head. I could never reach him. You tried with strength. I knew nothing else. The elder smiled gently. And now? The great wolf looked toward Elara. She sat beneath an ancient tree, patiently untangling burrs from the little prince's snowy fur while speaking to him in the same gentle voice she used with every frightened creature she had ever rescued. I'm learning. The elder nodded. A king who can learn is stronger than one who knows only how to command. The peaceful evening did not last. Just after nightfall, a lone rider burst into Moon Hollow. His exhausted horse stumbled before collapsing at the valley entrance. The messenger rolled into the grass, bleeding from a wound across his shoulder. Captain Rowan rushed forward. What happened? The young soldier struggled to breathe. The capital. His voice broke. They've closed the palace gates. Rowan frowned. Why? The messenger looked directly at the Alpha King. Lord Varric has declared that your majesty abandoned the kingdom. Silence swept across the valley. He claims the prince is dead. Elara's heart tightened. The messenger continued. He has gathered several noble houses under his banner. He says only he can protect Ashen Crown. The elder guardian slowly closed his eyes. So it begins. Captain Rowan gripped the hilt of his sword. Traitor. The messenger swallowed painfully. There is more. Every face turned toward him. He looked toward the tiny prince sleeping peacefully against Elara's side. Lord Varric has placed a reward upon the child's life. The words struck the valley harder than any weapon. Every wolf stood at once. Low growls rolled through Moon Hollow. The Alpha King's amber eyes hardened like frozen gold. Far away, inside the towering walls of Ashen Crown Castle, Lord Varric stood before the royal throne with one hand resting upon its carved arm. A cruel smile slowly spread across his face as he looked down at the kingdom's map. The wolves are hiding, he murmured. Good. His finger stopped over Moon Hollow. But nowhere remains hidden forever. Outside the castle, thousands of soldiers were already gathering beneath black banners, while deep within the sanctuary, no one yet realized that the greatest battle in the kingdom's history had already begun. Morning arrived beneath a sky the color of cold steel. A heavy silence rested over Moon Hollow, broken only by the gentle murmur of flowing springs and the distant calls of mountain hawks circling above the cliffs. The peaceful valley that had welcomed Elara now felt different. The air itself seemed to carry the weight of a coming storm. No one laughed that morning. The children who had played among the wolves the night before remained close to their families. The hunters quietly sharpened swords beside the ancient stones. Every wolf kept its eyes fixed on the forests surrounding the sanctuary. Even the birds flew lower than usual. Nature always sensed danger first. Elara stood beside the stream where she had first seen the silver mark glow beneath the little prince's fur. The tiny wolf lapped quietly at the water before chasing a drifting leaf that danced across the current. For a brief moment, he looked exactly as every young creature should. Carefree. Curious. Alive. Elara smiled softly. I wish the world could stay like this. Behind her, the Alpha King stepped from the shadows of the cedar trees. The morning light rested upon his white coat, making him seem almost carved from snow itself. He watched his son in silence. The little prince noticed him. For the first time. He did not hide. Instead, he hesitated. His tiny ears twitched uncertainly before he took one cautious step toward his father. Then another. The Alpha King lowered himself slowly until his powerful body rested upon the grass. He made no sudden movement. No command. No expectation. Only patience. The little wolf stopped an arm's length away. His blue eyes searched his father's face. The great wolf simply waited. After several long seconds, the prince reached forward and gently touched his tiny nose against the Alpha King's. It lasted only a heartbeat. But it was enough. The Alpha King closed his eyes. A quiet breath escaped him, carrying years of hidden sorrow away with it. Elara turned aside, pretending not to notice. Some moments belonged only to family. The old guardian approached quietly. It begins with trust, he said. No bond can be forced. The Alpha King looked toward Elara. And she reminded us of that. Before another word could be spoken, one of the scouts burst into the valley. His white fur was streaked with mud. His breathing came in sharp, hurried bursts. He bowed quickly. Black banners. Every hunter looked up. They've crossed the eastern ridge. Captain Rowan's face hardened. How many? More than 2,000. A wave of silence spread through Moon Hollow. 2,000 soldiers. Against a hidden sanctuary. The messenger continued. They're burning everything behind them. The elder guardian lowered his head. They mean to leave us nowhere to retreat. Smoke appeared above the distant trees. At first it looked like a single grey ribbon. Then another row. Soon dozens climbed into the morning sky. The forest was burning. Lord Varric had chosen fear as his weapon. Animals poured into Moon Hollow from every direction. Foxes, deer, mountain goats. Even wild rabbits fled through the sanctuary, driven by the advancing fire. The wolves did not chase them. Instead, they opened paths through the valley, allowing every frightened creature to pass safely. Elara watched a frightened fawn stumble near the stream. Its leg had been burned. Without thinking, she hurried toward it. The little prince followed close behind. She knelt beside the trembling animal, gently wrapping the injured leg with clean cloth soaked in cool spring water. Captain Rowan watched her. The enemy is almost here. She nodded. I know. And you're helping a deer. She looked up. If we forget kindness now. Her fingers carefully tightened the bandage. Then Varric has already won. Rowan smiled. Perhaps for the first time since they had met. I'll remember that. By afternoon, the smoke had reached the edge of Moon Hollow. Ash drifted through the air like dark snow. The scent of burning pine filled every breath. Then came the sound. War horns. Deep. Cold. Merciless. The black banners of Lord Varric appeared between the burning trees. Thousands of armored soldiers marched into view. Behind them rolled heavy siege engines. Archers spread across the ridges. The sanctuary had been surrounded. Lord Varric himself rode at the front atop a towering black horse. His polished armor gleamed beneath the smoky sky. He smiled as though arriving for a celebration instead of a battle. So, he called across the valley. The legends are real. His voice echoed among the ancient stones. I've come for the prince. The Alpha King stepped forward alone. His great white form stood proudly before the sanctuary. Every wolf gathered behind him. Not one retreated. Lord Varric laughed. You would sacrifice an entire kingdom for one weak pup. The Alpha King answered with silence. His amber eyes never left the traitor. Varric sighed dramatically. Very well. He raised one hand. Archers lifted their bows. Then, a tiny white figure walked past the Alpha King. The little prince. Every wolf froze. Elara's heart nearly stopped. The young wolf walked only a few steps before sitting calmly upon the grass. His silver mark began to glow. Softly at first. Then brighter. Moonlight-colored light spread across the ancient stones of Moon Hollow. The carvings awakened once more. One after another. The earth itself seemed to breathe. The ground trembled beneath everyone's feet. Ancient pillars surrounding the sanctuary answered the silver light. Long-forgotten symbols shone across every stone. A circle of pale light rose around the valley. Not a wall. A promise. The old guardian whispered through tears. The covenant. Every wolf lifted its head toward the sky. Their voices rose together. Not as cries of war. As a song. Deep. Beautiful. Ancient. The sound rolled across the mountains like the voice of the earth itself. Something remarkable happened. The forests answered. From every direction wolves emerged. Grey wolves. Black wolves. White wolves. Old wolves. Young wolves. Entire wild packs came running from distant valleys. Not because anyone commanded them. Because they remembered. They gathered beside the Alpha King until the hills themselves seemed alive. Lord Varric's confident smile slowly disappeared. This, he whispered, is impossible. The old guardian looked toward him. No, it is simply older than your ambition. Varric roared in anger. Attack! Thousands of soldiers charged. The valley erupted. Arrows darkened the sky. Shields crashed together. Steel rang through the mountains. The wolves moved like flowing rivers between the soldiers, never wasting motion, never striking without purpose. Captain Rowan led the hunters with calm precision. They fought to protect, not to conquer. Near the center of the battlefield, Varric forced his horse straight toward the little prince. If I kill the heir. His sword rose high above his head. The kingdom is mine. The frightened horse suddenly reared. Not because of the wolves. Because Elara stepped directly into its path. She carried no sword. No shield. Only herself. Varric laughed. You. He urged the horse forward. Move. Elara didn't. Behind her stood the little prince. She spread her arms. The same way she had done upon the cliff. Choosing another life before her own. Varric swung his sword. Before it could fall, the Alpha King struck. He leaped with the force of a breaking avalanche. His powerful body slammed into the black horse, throwing both rider and mount sideways across the grass. Varric crashed heavily against one of the ancient stones. His sword flew from his hand. Before he could stand, dozens of wolves surrounded him. Not attacking. Waiting. The soldiers watched in stunned silence. Their mighty commander. Completely helpless. Captain Rowan walked forward. He picked up Varric's fallen sword. Then calmly placed it far beyond the traitor's reach. It's over. Varric glared wildly. You need me. No. Rowan shook his head. The kingdom never did. One by one, Varric's own soldiers lowered their weapons. They had followed strength. Now they saw something greater. Loyalty. Compassion. Truth. The battle ended not with one final blow, but with thousands of swords falling into the grass. Silence returned. Smoke drifted harmlessly into the evening sky. The fires were slowly extinguished. The wounded, both human and wolf, were treated side by side. Elara moved quietly among them until long after sunset, binding cuts, cleaning burns, offering water,